Hi, my name is Michael,
water for our planet.
How
and
the country
welcome
has gotten to where
to my
it is
YouTube
today.
channel. Free Palestine. A two-state solution must be a reality. The people of Gaza have suffered far too long. Free Gaza. Pre-colonial Africa had up to 10,000 different states and autonomous groups with distant languages and customs in accordance to History of Africa, Wapitica. Also, pre-colonial Africa had great empires such as Segoy, Ghana, Mali. Rulers in the gold trade helped to secure the stability of great empires. Africa has the most natural resources in the world. In agreement with the United Nations Environment Program assessment, Africa holds 65% of the world's arable land. Their largest reserves are cobalt, diamonds, plutonium, and uranium in the world. What's more is that Africa is 3 times bigger than China, corresponding to hatongs.school.com. TopGlobe.com UK asserts that Africa can fit in 2 Russias. Pre-colonial African societies had complex systems. Empires covered large territories, interacting systems of governance. On the flip side, Africa's empire were in decline over time due to economic, social, cultural, political, and environmental issues. What's more is that Europeans took advantage of African societies that were in decline, and economic depression was occurring in Europe. The Black Death or bubonic plague wipes out an estimated 60% of the European population. According to sciencemuseum.org.uk, the first pandemic or wave of plagues began to die out in Europe after 4 years. But pockets of the disease remained, and small isolated outbreaks continued until the rise of the second pandemic in the late 15th centuries. The impact of the bubonic plague on the European economy was catastrophic, as people died from the Black Death disease. It made it harder and more difficult for the peasants to work the land for their lords that owned the land. Peasants requested or ordered higher wages from their lords. Labor shortages, lack of success in finding other possibilities to fill in these shortages. That has caused Europeans' nobilities to look toward Africa as a alternative to fix their economic issues. The seeds of colonialism were the roots that gave birth to imperialism in Africa. In addition, European lifesaver had become a catastrophic collision on Africa's economy. That lifesaver was the exploitation of African land. In fact, according to Slave Trade the United Nations, for over 400 years, more than 15 million men, women, and children were the victims of the tragic transatlantic slave trade, one of the darkest chapters in human history. It is important to note that the transatlantic slave trade was the largest long-distance forced movement of people in recorded history. Many times we get distracted through all these sports games and all these mundane things and that keep us distracted from day to day. But it's important to recognize the history of Africans and the sufferings that we endured in order to stabilize someone else's economy, land, and wealth. Also, a forced movement of a people to work plantations in distant land was not the end of Africa's dark history. Matter of fact, it was only the beginning. In the era of European exploitations of Africa, 400 years plus was needed to build Western civilization. According to PBSLearningMedia.org, the Berlin Conference sought to discuss the partitioning of Africa, establishing rules to amicably divide resources among the Western countries at the expense of the African people. It is important to note Europeans were able to secure countries they occupied or colonized by settling among and taking control over the native people from their respective societies. Not only, but also 7 countries colonized or occupied African, the continent of Africa: Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Spain, and Portugal. Also, the British and French colonized more than 95% of the African continent. In fact, Britain colonized 22 African states. France colonized 20. France retained control of the northern, western, and parts of Central Africa. Britain controlled north, western, and parts of Central Africa. Britain also controlled eastern and southern Africa. Britain controlled 95% of the continent. Remarkable. Where were the African tribes when all this was happening? By 1914, the imperial powers had fully colonized the continent, exploiting its people and resources according to facinghistory.org. It is important to note African resistance to European imperialism only failed because of European advanced weaponry. Africans knew if they kept the colonial wars going, like the Native Americans, it would be the extermination of the African people. So they sought other ways of resisting their occupiers or colonial rule during that era of time. Conclusively, on the flip side, Native Africans resisted colonial rule through religious opposition, mass protest, and nationwide protest with an end goal that would win the hearts and minds of their conquerors. All seeds of colonialism and imperialism must have the objective of honest trade between nations in order to benefit everyone's economy for the purpose of engaging in trade with any person from any country without the exploitation and causing poverty among people in other nations. The Atlantic slave trade, colonialism, it could have been avoided if Africans built advanced weaponry and the protection of their continent and their people. The lack of doing so has caused 400 plus years of relentless suffering that could have easily been avoided if these military weapons were invented. Thanks for watching my YouTube channel.